Hey everyone, my name is Poisonblade and I hope all of you are doing well today. So for today I'm going to be building the last standalone build for the Australia pack, which is of course going to be the Dingo habitat, or in this case a Dingo reserve or Dingo nature reserve. So with that being said, let's get straight into today's build. So the idea for the Dingo habitat, well, it went through 2 stages and only later in the first stage did I get the idea for the waterfall that I'm currently building, or well, now I'm building like rock walls to go alongside the waterfall, but the waterfall is inspired or also referenced but also inspired by Mackenzie Falls in Australia. But the waterfall only got added later on in the first stage of the idea, and the first stage of the idea was quite different than the nature reserve that we ended up with. Because the first stage was a glamping. Yes, I did not say that wrong, I hope. But it's basically like a camping, but then literally the only thing that sort of makes it look like camping is that you are in a tent. You have like all facilities and it's basically like very luxurious camping where you're barely camping actually. Because for me, camping is like being in nature and not having like all facilities like right next to you or in the place where you sleep. But yeah, that idea got cancelled after a while, or just I didn't find it that interesting anymore after a while to build. Later on during that stage, I got the idea of the waterfall, and that is the one thing that remained. So this is usually the thing with any idea for a build that I have. I sometimes just start building something and then the idea just transforms along the way because I find like this thing looking nice and I want to build further onto that, and then I can't use my original idea, so then I have to sort of transform the original idea. And sometimes I just grow bored with the original idea. And that's what happened with the glamping. Still a weird word for me. But yeah, as I said, the waterfall is inspired by Mackenzie Falls. It looks very different when you look at like the color scheme, which is also where the tricky part comes in, because I say it's inspired, but it's also a lot more like directly referenced, because the waterfall itself, when it comes to like the structure of it, it's almost identical, I would say. But then of course I used brown reddish rocks, and then when you look at like pictures of Mackenzie Falls, it has this like grayish rock, and yeah, I did not want to change the reddish rocks. So in the end it was kind of difficult of like, alright, what trees fit in here but still makes it look like very lush and such, and still fit in also with like the Australia theme, or like, because the waterfalls also have a little bit of like a temperate biome to them, so that's why I use these, I think, sycamore trees. But then the rest of the habitat, because this is a huge habitat, first of all. I think it's like 11,000, 20,000 square meters or something. Like, it's huge. So yeah, that's also why it's a nature reserve. And why I actually had to include like a safari thing into it. Or like a safari, like those truck things. It's actually the first time that I used that thing, because, well, all the other projects so far, such as Cairn al-Bashar, Isla Pacifica and Beaver's Dam, they don't really allow for that. I mean, Beaver's Dam probably wouldn't be able to afford it. Cairn al-Bashar, it floats. There's not really that much space for a safari thing, and it also, there are no cars meant to be in Cairn al-Bashar. Same goes actually with Isla Pacifica, where it's set in a different time period where there are no cars. Or, well, Isla Pacifica also just doesn't have the space for it. But here I wanted to use it because the habitat itself was just so huge. Like, there are 6 dingoes in here that I placed. You still sometimes have a hard time spotting it. Although they do really like one spot in the habitat. That's most of the time with all of the animals that I have. They really like one spot in the habitat, and you will always find them there. They literally just stick to one spot. They don't use the toys or anything in any other spot. They just stick there, even though it's probably the most boring spot. And when it came to the waterfall, I try to make smaller streams. I did get this idea from looking at like a video and picture of Aston Wolf, of like him trying to get like the smaller streams. No shame towards Aston, but I immediately just thought, why don't you just like put the waterfall sideways so that you get like the smaller, like the, not the broad side of the waterfall, but the smaller one, and then turn it around a little bit so that it, well, that you get a smaller stream. So in the end, it is a smaller stream. It's not that noticeable because there's so many waterfalls here, or well, the waterfall effects. But yeah, I just was inspired, or I just wanted to prove that you can make smaller waterfalls. It's just tricky. But anyway, in the end, I was of course really happy with the waterfall because, you know, if you are not happy with a build, you usually rip it out, or, well, sometimes I'm not happy with a build, but then I've gone so far along that I'm like, how can I try to fix this? That's usually the case where it's like, yeah, this is not the perfect thing, but I'm too far along with the build that I don't want to take it out again and start over. That might be a little bit of like laziness on my part, that I don't want to rip things out. Yeah, when I looked at like the pictures of Mackenzie Floss, this was all made actually during a stream, so anyone who doesn't know, yes, I do occasionally stream on Twitch. Not, well, this week that you're watching this, it was quite frequent. I think I streamed 2 days, which is usually the case. Like I stream Tuesday and Friday, but sometimes it switches days. But yeah, this was, well, the entire video was actually made during streams. So that's the place where you can really find how long these builds take. All in all, I had to cut down 6 hours of video into a barely 20-minute video. Yeah, luckily, of course, there's, with the speed builds, you also speed it up, so there's not much that, you know, gets cut, but a build of mine usually takes along that time period. But then, of course, as I said, there is also a safari ride in here, and the only really noticeable thing about the safari ride is, yeah, the roof. Because I actually, when it came to like these new sort of roof pieces that we got from the Australia pack, I actually like the underside more than the outside. Like the one with the pattern, I don't like as much, while the underside with the more square-ish triangular pattern, I actually like a lot more, because it's easily usable in like a, well, modern build. Of course, you can also turn it the other way around and have like the other side with the colorable pattern completely like white, because you can do that, and I actually did that because I didn't want to have the pattern on the inside. Yeah, it's a very, I would say, demure station. It's not that like big in your face, because I just don't feel like this would be like a huge thing here. Like, it's a nature reserve, so they're trying to keep it a little bit like quiet and peaceful and such. So they're not going to like build like a huge station for this. And this is not because I'm lazy and didn't want to build a huge station. But yeah, I also saw some like similarities between the station and the koala builds, or the koala house. So then I thought, alright, how can I change this up? Because I don't want to go build somewhat the exact same thing. Yeah, at first I thought, I'm going to build a ranch. This is nothing like a ranch. Again, like another way of like the idea just transforming or just completely changing while I build. Always a little bit difficult to say like, oh, how do I get my inspiration? Because most of the time I get like an idea at first, but then when I start building, the idea just changes a lot depending on like, oh, I like how I did this thing and I want to use that a lot more. And then, oh, I don't like this part of that original idea. And then like the idea changes so much during building that I have a hard time just saying, this is what inspired me. Because halfway through the build, I just get inspired by my own build, which in a way sounds very, well, egotistical or narcissistic, where like, oh yeah, I use my own builds as inspiration, but that's usually the case, where later up ends up like, oh, I like this angle of the build, I want to do something more with that. Like the idea just constantly changes. but some things stay the same. So here you can see I liked the like glass roof, so I basically just copied that and switched it around. Yeah, I'm really happy with the station. It's very, I would say, minimalistic. Again, this might be because I was a little bit lazy here, but I mean, I just really like this building. And also, like, I think Jen or Chris said it, but I don't know for sure. I mean, the streams are usually late, so yeah, I'm always just a little bit loopy when it's later. Weirdly enough, like when it's like 3 a.m, I'm completely awake. Do any of you guys have that where it's like, yeah, I want to sleep at like, I don't know, 12 p.m. or something, and then like you end up just watching things on your phone, and then it's 2 a.m, you're like completely awake, like you're not tired at all. And then when 4 a.m. hits, it's like my brain wants to be awake and do things, but the rest of my body is just slowly dying. Yeah, that's usually the case where I sometimes just wake up at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. and then I just want to build, but my body just says, stay in bed. You don't know if I'm the only one who sometimes has that. Well, sometimes, usually. Sometimes I just pull all-nighter because I just can't sleep anymore because my brain just doesn't want to sleep when it's awake. And that's usually, sadly, at 2 a.m. in the morning. Maybe it's because I'm a little bit sleep deprived by that point, and then my brain just goes into over mode, or just, yeah, it's a weird time. Especially lately with, well, during that heat wave. Like, I will keep talking about the heat wave because I think Dutch heat waves are the worst, because it's not really that hot, it's just humid. So you just constantly are just sweating and sweating and sweating, and you feel disgusting because you are constantly sweating, and it's just the worst. So yeah, I will keep complaining about the heat waves, and if there's a new heat wave coming on, you will hear it 24/7 from me, because yeah, that's also, well, I don't know if this is like a stereotype with the Dutch, but we like to complain. We are the best at it, so whenever there's something to complain about, you will hear it. But anyway, so here's the part where I really saw like, oh, this looks a little bit too similar for me to the like koala build. So I was like, alright, how can I change this? How can I use different colors? How can I do anything? And then I decided to put plants on the roof. Yeah, let's just say this is quite a thing in like urban design, or, you know, basically the studies that I follow, or the college that I go to, where it's like, you know, put plants on the roof. And now I just keep doing that with like most modern builds that I make. It's just like, put plants on the roof, because you want to minimize like the carbon footprint of a building or something, and you want to make the roofs useful. But it also usually, like, when the roof is a little bit boring, or the building is boring, it also usually helps to have plants on the roof, because it makes it a little bit interesting. So yeah, because this building is basically a square or a rectangle, and that's usually what I try to avoid, actually. Because here's the thing, this is, I think, both in The Sims and in Planet Zoo, real life buildings, like regular buildings, like build your own home in Planet Zoo, it usually ends up being pretty boring. If I build my own home in Planet Zoo, it would look very boring, because most homes are rectangles. And maybe with like a, well, sometimes flat roof, but most of the time like those pointy roofs, and it's usually very boring. So I always try to avoid making buildings that are a complete rectangle or square. Usually this means that I add a tower to it, because I'm a squirrel, I like towers. But when it came for the sign of the safari, I just wanted like that very like almost theme park-esque style sign, or just like, this is basically a sign that you can find probably everywhere. It's not a very special sign, and I really wanted to actually get that just like somewhat generic sign. Like, they thought it looked great, but now it has somewhat aged and it's not as special anymore. Even though the building is like super modern, but the sign itself is just there. And as I said, the waterfall is inspired by Mackenzie Falls, so I just named this place Mackenzie Falls Truck Rental. I should probably have named it Mackenzie Falls Nature Reserve, but I just thought truck rentals was a little bit more fun. But now for the rest of the habitat, this is like a lot of today's video was actually nature, which is usually what I actually cut out, but it's a nature reserve, so I had to have the nature in there. But I wanted to have like a sort of temperate biome near the waterfall, so that's where you see a lot of those sycamore trees. But then when you get in the rest of the habitat, or in the rest of the nature reserve, I kind of wanted more of like that Australian outback vibe, so it's a lot of plants, a lot of grass and bushes and such, not a lot of trees. And here I say again, I really wanted to have like a sapling version of the eucalyptus tree, because all of the eucalyptus trees that we have gotten in the Australia pack are huge. I have to sink all of them into the ground, and there's usually that one tree that's made out of 2 trees that works well if you sink it into the ground. The other trees don't. So you will see me a little bit like struggling to find like the right trees to place here, because I didn't want to have that height, and in the end I just decided, alright, I can't do it too much about it, let's add those eucalyptus trees. And then, like, you wouldn't probably see this in a nature reserve, but because it's Planet 2 and you have to provide some shelter for the animals, I built basically a canopy between 3 trees. And it's not the best canopy, that's something I can say for certain. And I don't think it actually covers like the shelter area. But I do like to sleep in there, so it works, but yeah, I just really try to get like that nature reserve idea where it's like they don't really put too much into the actual reserve because they want to have like, you know, nature, and they want to have the animals in their natural environment. But then they also have to get some income, so that's why there's like a safari. So yeah, and this is like the thing with like the dingoes, I think, like they're not endangered or anything, if I'm correct. Like, I could be wrong here, and this is something I always want to stress in my videos. Like, anything I say, I could be wrong, and if I say anything wrong, please do point it out, because otherwise I'm like spreading like false information. So please, if I say something wrong, do point it out. But from what I know, like, dingoes themselves are not like endangered, like they're not like hunted to extinction or anything, but they are basically screwing themselves to death. Which sounds weird, and I never thought I would say that, but from what I've heard and read, it's basically they're like breeding too much with like domestic dogs, and that's why there's like a decreasing number of like pure-blooded dingoes, and most of them, like, I think there's like a fence in Australia, and like north of that fence you have more like pure-blooded dingoes, and south of it it's more likely that the dingo is like maybe half dingo, half domestic dog, and it's, yeah, they're screwing themselves to death, which is weird. But anyway, that's going to be it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. This is not going to be the last standalone build, I will assure you that, but it's going to be probably the last standalone build for the Australia pack. So yeah, if you want to see any other standalone builds for like a specific animal or just a building in general, please do put it down below in the comments, because I always try to read and reply to any comments that I will get. But anyway, again, hope you enjoyed the video. If you enjoyed it and want to see more, you can of course subscribe, and of course hitting the like button helps out a lot. But with that being said, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and bye bye!